we're all just here for the purpose of being a better church, being a better community for those who've had terrible experiences in church, or they were told to leave, or they were told to, change the way that they live their life, or else, I think that that's what's been so refreshing and so, amazing for me. Yeah, I mean, I found Han United Methodist Church through a conference that I was attending. It was Queer Christian Fellowship. I had met some people through that conference, and I was saying like, oh, I'm coming from a very conservative church, and this is like my first foray into something different, and I don't really have a church right now because I'm still looking for one. And someone from the conference mentioned Han, and I was like, oh, there's a progressive Korean American church. That sounds like something I've never heard of before, and I should check it out. This was when we were still doing service in person, and I went by myself because I didn't really have anyone else to go with. And I walked in, and it was like, it feels cliched to say deja vu, but it felt like I met these people before, but they didn't seem strangers, or they didn't seem like frightening to me, which normally strangers are. So yeah, that's how I found Han, and I ended up staying.
The phrase Korean American queer-affirming progressive church, that blew my mind, because to me, Korean American church and then queer-affirming, they do not belong in the same phrase together. They're just like oil and water. And so it's just like, what is this? Thought I was done forever with the church, but I guess I'll like check this one out, and then I'll peace out again. But like that first service, I did not realize how much I needed that, and I was kind of feeling conflicted, because I didn't really want to enter back into the church again, any church, and especially not a Korean church, just because that's where also a lot of like little, I guess, spiritual traumas for me come from. But it was needed. And I didn't know that it was needed.
Yeah, I kind of went in with no expectations, because it's, like you said, Korean American, queer, progressive church seems very foreign. But when I walked in, I think in that moment, I just was like, oh, the people that I met were genuine and very kind. And like I said, like people that I felt I knew before. Sometimes when you walk into a church and you just see people like zone in on you, like you're the next target, their whole point is to like get you to come back again. I think that wasn't there. It was just, oh, these people like genuinely love this church and love what it stands for, and they're not here to sell me an idea or sell me a concept or sell me a religion. They're just there to praise God and be part of community. And I think that was very refreshing.
I think I felt when I first came into Han, just this big exhale of just, okay, I don't have to keep looking. And I guess I've just been trying so hard, making queerness, Korean, Christianity, all of that mixed together. And just really, I felt like I was forcing it, but at Han, that tension was just gone. And it felt really nice to have very similar stories to everybody. Like within the first 5 words of like, oh yeah, I grew up in a conservative Korean church, and people just exhale like, oh, I know what you mean. And then you don't even have to finish the story really. You can just be and just like, oh yeah, like everybody gets it. Everybody, even if they're not queer, like they come from a story of, oh, something in the conservative Christian Korean church didn't work out for me, but we're here now and we've all like been through some battle or some struggle. And so yeah, it just felt really nice not to be I guess like the negative way is to be the weird one, but also in a positive way, like to not be the special one either. It's to just be one of many. It's like, okay, like finally. Yeah, it's something I'm still grateful for it. The not explaining that needs to be done is, yeah, a godsend. I think in Korean churches, you inherit a very punitive, very punishing view of what God is. And it's like if God's love is a circle, like your whole life, you're trying to shrink yourself into that circle. And if you go to enough services, if you go to enough Bible studies, if you memorize enough verses, if you pray every day in the morning enough, then like you can squeeze and make yourself tinier. Since being on this whole queer Christian journey, it's been a lot more of just take that circle and expand the circle. And God's love is so much bigger and God is just so much more loving than we can imagine. And yeah, just not contorting so much and like really restricting yourself as much as you can. Yeah, I feel like that's something Korean that I am still trying to let go of and still trying to like unburden myself from.
Yeah, I think for me, I feel like Korean American churches or Korean churches that I've been to were very much black and white. Like, this is wrong, this is right. I don't think every church believed the same thing, but at the same time, I think it was just something where I was like, oh, okay, I guess we don't do that as Christians. And I just kind of took it at face value, but now I'm sort of like, oh, but that's not necessarily the case. But I think in Korean churches, whatever the pastor says or whatever everyone decides is law. And like you don't question elders, you don't question pastors, you don't question your parents. Like, this is just something that you accept and you obey. I had to sort of reframe my mind of like, but why can't we question things? Why can't we get more explanation more than because I said so or because the pastor said so, because it says in the Bible? I'm like, but why does the Bible say that? Like, where is the explanation of like why things are the way they are? And I think that's been always no, you just have to obey, which doesn't leave much room to expand the circle, as you said before. I think that's needed.
How has it been to, I guess, understand your queerness within Christianity, within spirituality, and how did y'all come to queer your faith?
I think for me, it's still a muscle that I'm learning how to use, because sometimes I find myself being like, catching myself almost saying like, oh, am I allowed to do that? But then I have to be like, yeah, it doesn't make sense to not. But when I'm saying something like, this is something that I know I believe in, is that I don't think everyone has the same exact faith, or I don't think people practice their faith exactly the same. And there are examples of that in the Bible, I believe, where people practice their faith differently, or there's different levels of faith, or there's varying levels, or God speaks to people in different ways. Queering the status quo, for me, has been like, there are different ways in which God shows up to people, or speaks through people, or shows people their own way. And I think people have a hard time in conservative spaces of saying like, yeah, but everyone needs to follow the law. And I'm like, yes, but the law is not what you think the law is for other people. Like, maybe God has different standards for people, or maybe God has different standards for, as in the Bible, like Jewish people had different standards than Gentiles. And why can't that be part of our faith? And why does it have to be so just like one way? Like, why can't we look at things a different way? And why is that so wrong? Everything comes back to how the Bible is interpreted and what you believe is truth. And a lot of times that's been dictated by what the church has said, without any room for different interpretations, I guess, or different ways to look at it. And I think queering the status quo is something like, but why can't we see what God has planned for all of us?
I don't know. Like for me, like I lived with the tension of feeling in my heart that it was wrong to be so, for the church to be so queer phobic, but I had difficulty connecting that with just biblical, or at least, yeah, biblical understandings. And yeah, and I came into contact with many people who were queer affirming allies, as well as queer pastors, but I had difficulty accepting it for myself, because for me, I couldn't connect it biblically. But then when I was in seminary and I was studying, I was just studying the Bible through more of an academic lens rather than like a theological lens or a doctrinal lens. That was learning about ancient sexuality, sexual practices, sexual norms, sexual understandings, and then also learning about the history of the invention of heterosexuality in the 18th century, and learning how new heterosexuality was. That was, for me, that was so liberating. And yeah, like I had to understand it biblically for me to accept for myself queer affirming theology, and to accept for myself.
Yeah. And I think just understanding more about the translations of the Bible, I realized like, oh, okay, our Bible was translated by a group of white men who lived in a certain time period of history. And for everyone to say this is God's word and not believe that there have to be biases that occurred in the translation during that time. And I think even just saying that is like considered blasphemous to a lot of conservative churches. But for us, we're not saying that the whole Bible is wrong. I think there has to be room for us to be like, hey, what could have been unconscious biases that seeped into these translations that have real world implications for a queer Christian who's trying to, love God and have community. Apparently, nowadays it's hard to have both. Like, You can either love God on your own and not have community in church, or you can have community and not God. Or you can have community and like change the way that you live to please this God. And it's just like the options are so limited, and I just think it's on the people who are privileged in this area to have to say something about it, because for us to say like, hey, this doesn't seem right, this doesn't seem fair, of course they're going to be like, well, it's because you are living in sin and you don't like that and you don't like what the Bible says. That's not how the Bible works. And then it's like, yeah, but why can't we look more into this, you know?
It's really hard to argue with.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with. It's in the Bible. When I was in a conservative church, I almost felt like I was an imposter all the time, and being so afraid of like someone finding out, oh, like she's an imposter, she's not supposed to be here, you know, like she was tricking us the whole time. Like it wasn't like 100% self-imposed, but it was really shaped around, you know, what it means to be a Christian and what that path looks like for you. And it was the same for everyone. And if you lived differently, or if you know, I don't know, God forbid, smoked cigarettes, like you, this was like the path to sin, and there was no like room for showing love first, I think is what was missing there, is like giving someone the benefit of the doubt of like, hey, it's not that you don't belong here, it's just, you know, we want to know more about you and more about like what your relationship to God is like. You know, like there was no curiosity. It was just they see your actions, or they see what they deem as you doing something wrong, and then kind of like the shame and the condemnation that comes with that, which is kind of what the fear that makes you stay in the closet, or the fear that makes you continue to pretend to be someone that you're not. That's not sustainable. And it's also not conducive to a faith that's genuine, you know? Like you almost feel like you're performing for God and not really believing it and truly having that relationship with God.
My first time meeting an ally in a queer Christian church who wasn't queer, and for them to have such a similar journey of, you know, something's not right about the way that we treat queer people and the way that we view poverty and so many things, and for them to question and come into their own progressiveness. Because, I mean, I had met so many other queer Christians at that point, and like, it's sad to say, but like, it's like, well, like we have to like change it because we don't fit into conservative Christianity. But to see people who, you know, straight allies don't need to change their belief systems, but for them to do it because they also felt that little tiny voice or that little ping in their heart that says, something's just not adding up. I don't really think this is the way that church is supposed to be. And for us to meet in a progressive church was really eye-opening and really, really special. And I'm thankful for meeting so many other allies like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was very validating to have someone that's not just doing it because they're also a queer Christian. Like I almost have that voice in the back of my head of like, of course, like you're a queer Christian, you're gonna say it's okay for you to be in a queer relationship. But for, yeah, someone who doesn't really benefit from it, or it, you know, there's no, oh, but you're just saying that because XYZ, to meet so many people, part of the community that fit that, it's not just the people who founded it, but the the people who come and are like, yes, of course, that's terrible. Like, church should not be responsible for that, or church should not say that. I never thought I could find that, honestly, in my life, to have a community that, would agree. I figured I would just have to, pretend somewhere else, pretend somewhere slightly better. That was like my expectation. But to have a community where I'm like, I'm just known being me, like I'm not known as like the queer Christian, or that's not my full identity. We're all just here for the purpose of being a better church, being a better community for those who've had terrible experiences in church, or they were told to leave, or they were told to, change the way that they live their life, or else, I think that's what's been so refreshing and so, amazing for me.
I don't know if this is like too personal of a question, but like with family members who are Christian, how has that journey been for y'all? I don't know if that's too.
I feel like something that I was told was when someone comes out of the closet, sometimes the parents go into the closet. And I think that metaphor really struck me as understanding my parents' journey towards acceptance. And I think this is what I have a lot of grace on, is that feeling of like, yeah, how scared was I during that time of coming out, and that sort of gets put onto the parents if they're like now in the closet. They don't know this reality, they don't know this world, they are scared too, like their life has been sort of upended. And I think it's a journey where I'm hoping that with my parents, we're gonna get there eventually. I think they've come further in the amount of time that I thought that they would be. So I think that's a win, but I can't say that's the truth for everyone.
So I came out to my parents because I saw another family who was so accepting of their kid. And I said that if there's any chance of me having anything close to this, then the biggest gift I can give them is time. So it has to be now, and then even if it takes them 50 years, then we'll have like maybe 1 year at least of them being okay with it and just being able to coexist in that way. I knew that it would be difficult, and it definitely was when coming out. I don't really know how they feel about it now, because we've just stopped talking about it, because otherwise we couldn't have a relationship. And then you just kind of softly come out every once in a while, like, oh, I'm gonna go on a date with a guy, just to make sure like I'm not slipping back into being straight, like no matter what you think. But it took me so long to be comfortable with it for myself. So giving them that same amount of time, if not more, because they're from an older world and more Korean world than I am in. So just knowing that they're doing their best. How about for you?
Well, there were queer people. There were queer people in the older world too.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess like for me, I'm just waiting for just waiting for some of my family members to, and also just like other loved ones to come out of that bondage of cis heteronormativity. And yeah, I was kind of recently also asked a question from someone about grace and how queer Christians understand grace. And I had told them that I think we already come into queer Christian spaces like already having understood grace for ourselves, but also for our loved ones. There are family members that I can't bring myself to go no contact with. Although, you know, if you have to, do what you have to do what you must. For me, I don't know. It's like I love them and I pray for them and I have faith that they'll come to I don't know, that they'll come into a better understanding of a God whose love is just way more expansive than we can conceive of. And yeah.
Yeah, I think for the longest time I felt the need to protect my parents because I think a lot of Korean culture comes into play and there's a lot of shame that comes with it that doesn't just affect you, but affects your entire family. Being a queer Korean Christian, I can see where I was like, I have to protect my parents. Like, if I didn't have to protect my parents, I probably would have come out way earlier, you know, because if there was no fear of them being ostracized or them being made fun of or them being shamed or other people affecting that just because of me, I think I would have come out way earlier. But I'm sure a lot of other Korean Christians who are queer feel similarly about, you know, why would I do that to my parents? They're in a good place. They're, you know, upstanding citizens in their church community. And yes, that's true. And I agree. Like, I think it's the message is for people who aren't queer or don't have queer children. Like, you are creating an environment where it's preventing families from knowing each other, you know? And I don't think they're aware of it. I think it's sort of like having racial privilege. Like, you don't understand what it's like to just be able to go to church and praise God and worry about, oh, was I too greedy? Was I too, you know, like, you're not worrying about all these other things that happen just by ostracizing someone for being different or ostracizing someone for what they did or what they might have done. You know, I think this is what creates hostile environments in church and turns people away from God. And I think the number one thing is, like, we have to turn people towards God, and this is not behavior that's helping spread the word and spread the good news. So
When I came out to my church, right afterwards, I had the lead pastor invited me to have a lunch with him, and while we were eating, my mom came up to us and said, "Oh, thank you so much for eating with him." And I was like, "Oh, like, you really thought like either I would be sitting alone after this, or I'd be like run out, or I would be mocked, all the things that you had mentioned before." It's like, oh, like all of your fears, like I could kind of hear behind that sentence. And it just kind of lessened the the sting of other things that were said.
Yeah, I think similarly, I knew my parents were concerned for me. There was a conversation where, it's like, but are you okay with people like saying things, or, what would people say to you? Like, and I think it was less about them being embarrassed of me, but them being concerned that I would probably have hardship over being out and being open. Like, oh, do you really want that for yourself? Type question. And it's a fair question. Like, some people, the answer is no. And I understand, like, it's about protecting yourself and being safe. So I think when I understood they weren't sort of saying it like, you really want to live this way, but more like, oh, like, are you gonna be okay? I think when I kind of heard that, are you gonna be okay with this? Obviously in Korean, but they are worried for like my safety almost. I think that's when I kind of saw it from their perspective. Like, of course, if I thought my child was going to be in danger, like, I would be very worried too.
I guess like that's conflated with, I don't know, Korean American immigrant worries, survival instinct of being, I don't know, being away from like the motherland. Because you know how immigrant parents, they tend to have in some ways different expectations. There's just a general concern more for survival. Do you think it was conflated with those concerns, or?
I'm sure, because like I feel like there were several times when, if I mentioned, oh, we're gonna go to the march, we're gonna go whatever with our church, like we went to Pride March together. The worry is like, are you sure? Like, is that what you want to do? And it's just like, oh, I think it's more concern about being in public. You could get hurt. You could, no one knows what's going to happen. I'm sure there was some form of concern there.
Yeah, it's like if I go hiking, my parents are like, my dad's like, are you sure? Are you okay with the risks? Here's everything that can happen. So are you sure?
Yeah, I don't know how you came out to your church. I think that you did something I would never ever do, but I think what's so, I guess, full circle for meeting Paul when he came to Han for the first time, I was like, oh, I've met you before. And he was like, what? And then he was at a conference that I was at too, where we were both there. It was a queer Christian conference. And he went up like during open mic and told his story. And it was like, oh, there's a Korean American Christian who's telling their story. And I was like, I never thought I would hear someone tell their story out loud, because I was just so siloed and isolated. And I was like, wow, like I wish I got to know him. So I was too scared to like introduce myself to you. But then I met you again at Han, and I was like, I know you from before. Like, I know your story. Your story's been in my head for years. And it was like so crazy, but like so much gratitude to like hear your story and feel like I'm not alone. And like Sulkiro for just like our church is our church. A large part of it is because of you and the sermons you say and just the encouragement that we get, not just about who we are, but who we should be in the community that we should be. And I think it's been such a blessing to me to know the two of you, and I feel like I'm receiving too much and like not giving more.
I mean, yeah, I like y'all's stories. I mean, that's something that seminary taught me. It was just how sacred stories are, because all those biblical stories are people's. Some people can say those are my ancestors' stories, and y'all stories are, I don't know, just like very like biblical too in a lot of ways. And yeah, like y'all's stories are so important, and hearing them has been like, I don't know, chicken soup for the queer Korean American Christian soul.